Oh, that was yummy. Thank you, Celia. So we're talking about the winds of change, and so we had a little changing up in there, didn't we? It is my joy to say that Jackson will be back next week, and it is also my joy to have Celia here with us this week. I know she is a favorite amongst CSL peers, and oh, that doesn't sound good. CSL Prescottonians, how's that? It cracked me up. So sometimes change happens and we're not even aware of it. And sometimes it's weird and sometimes it's great. And sometimes we both want Jackson to come back and want to keep Celia here all the time. So today we're going to talk about the winds of change. And it's pretty, it's interesting to me because we have been through so much change. This center in particular has been through a lot of change in the past year. We've been through even more change in the past few months. And one of the changes that many of us were looking forward to is coming back into the center. And I'm here to tell you and to just raise and praise our tech team that Jackson and Nina Rochette and Clay and Seamus Smith and I were in the center for a couple hours. I feel like I'm missing somebody, but we were in the building for a couple hours trying to get to a point where I at least could broadcast from the center, even if we had to keep the rest of the people on their individual bandwidth. And it started off challenging, and it kept getting worse and worse to the point where it started, my brand new tablet started freezing up, and the delay went from, the delay between what was going on the screen and what was going on in the room started at about 15 seconds, which doesn't sound like much. It feels very long. It feels even longer when it gets up to closer to a minute. We pushed every button we could find, and what we figured out was that this was not how it was going to work. And so luckily, we know that our new internet service should be here within 2 to 4 weeks. We'll be able to start bringing lots of people back into the center in terms of who is doing service. And we will be keeping a close eye on what the CDC has to say about how many people we can have in the room and how we might seat people on the patio, and how to bring the kids back and how to have them safely in the building. All of it is happening, and that's the thing about change. The ones you want seem to happen very quietly and slowly. The ones that you weren't expecting or are not happy, excited about seem to smack you in the face, don't they? At least they do with me. So here's the thing. All of the practitioners, and not practitioners, but ministers of the Centers for Spiritual Living, and there's about 850 of us, get together and do this thing where we create, each year, we create a theme for the year and then titles, and then if we choose to, we can even look online and find ideas for the individual talks. And my friend Reverend Kathleen Sibley, who is over in Geneva, Switzerland, actually helped create this week's talk. And she talks about this place called Lake Leman, or Leman, probably, I doubt it's Lehman, but it's near Geneva in Switzerland. And it's situated between the Alps and the Jura Mountains. And when you have that many mountains, you're going to have some funky winds. So she says there's about 70 different wind patterns going on in that one lake at any given time. And when things go, when the winds die down, basically the sailors and the people who are sailing their boats around this really awesome, beautiful lake have to watch for the ripples in the water. So they have to look for the signs. And never mind where they thought they were going, they try and get into the flow of where those ripples are so that the wind can take them where they want to be eventually. But they have learned you have to act within natural laws or you're going to be stuck. So we watch for the signs and the maybe some people would even call them omens and portents, but we look for what's going on in our physical world to tell us how we are using the natural laws, what we would call the law of cause and effect, in order to get where we want to go. And so one of the signs I look for is this becoming less than joyful? Celia's song was wonderful about what will you stand for and what brings you joy and what really drains the life from you. And as I stood there on the platform or stepped down from the platform as we were trying to make it work and watched Seamus stand at the podium. And some of you know Kid Minister he will be taking over for me as soon as he's allowed to drive. As I went through that process, I just watched all of us get less and less joyful, get less and less happy, get more and more tense and trying desperately to speak well to each other. And I just felt the energy of love and power that usually feels like Sunday just drain out of me. And that's why I eventually made the call. I'm not doing this. I will not be physically present in the center if what that means is I'm fighting against the natural law that says we don't yet have the bandwidth we need to do something that we can all enjoy. Now, unbeknownst to many of you, there's this wonderful change going on. Maybe some of you didn't know that we were about to get new internet. And again, I send my thanks to Tom Kimmerly for discovering that as an option. I send my thanks to the practitioners who prayed it into being. I send my thanks to all of us as we pray it into being even faster. We're going to be the 2 weeks, not the 4, right, guys? So as I watch that happen and as I know that the good is coming, my job is to rest in trusting that and not try to push. Not try to force it to happen faster and end up with something that just makes everybody miserable. The other thing that's going on that most people can't see is as I'm watching the numbers. And what I'm finding is that we are actually at almost our old numbers on Sundays. Although we can only seat about 25 in the sanctuary, we're still hanging out at around 100 during the live stream. And if you wait and look at the numbers a little bit further out after people have had a chance to have their house parties and watch together in their homes, which, by the way, is an option for anyone who has friends in their safe circle and a smart TV that they can watch it on YouTube. It's one way of getting away with eating and drinking during service. We actually are averaging anywhere from 150 to 200 per Sunday that are being served by this very thing we're doing right now. 150 to 200 people are invisible to each other unless you sign in online, unless you happen to be sitting together at the center. Most of the power behind a Sunday service, the power of reaching people, is not visible to us. And so even if you think you're sitting on a becalmed lake outside of Geneva and you think there's no wind, trust that your leadership is watching for the ripples and steering our shared ship, or boat anyway, in the direction of natural law. This is happening. And here's the thing, we suffer when we try to push things into being. When we try and effort something into being, we're working really hard to make this prayer work, and we're praying so loud and so big and so strong, and from a place of fear, because we are afraid God actually won't answer our prayer. We are not working with the natural law. We are working from our own egos. We are working from our own sense of hyper responsibility. Especially here in America, we are taught that we must pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps. Anyone ever heard that one? Do you know that that phrase started out as asking someone to do the impossible? No one pulls themselves up by their own bootstraps. What we believe here is that I can't do it for you, but you don't have to do any of this alone either. We depend on the divine within each and every one of us to lift us up and get things done. And I invite everyone to start playing with the idea that suffering and efforting is not good spiritual practice. I usually say the best spiritual practice is the one you do. But in this case, I'm going to suggest to you that suffering and martyrdom are a spiritual practice whose time, if it ever was, has passed. I am going to invite you to join me in knowing that when we are working with the natural law, when we are paying good close attention to the voice of the Christ or the Buddha within each and every one of us when we listen deeply for that voice, even when it tells us to do something weird, like in my case this week, don't show up at the office for work on Sunday. Okay, fine. If we are really listening and in touch with, that's what people used to call the still small voice. Mine tends to yell a lot. If we're in touch with that, everything can happen effortlessly. People can be opened up with joy, and we get to learn from our joy and be pulled by a vision rather than pushed by our pain, rather than learning from suffering. Ernest Holmes, who founded this philosophy, says that we have learned all we have to from suffering, and it's time we learn to live from joy. Another thing he wrote is that the divine plan is one of freedom. Bondage is not God ordained. Freedom is the birthright of every living soul. So how do we get to that freedom? We figure out where those ripples are. We start paying attention to the natural laws and the information we get back from our world. If you look at your physical world, at the physical world, a religious scientist will see that as a reflection or a report card on what we had been believing right up to that moment. So if you are feeling unloved, if you are feeling unwelcome, if you are feeling like your life is a struggle, then there is some part of your mind, more than likely subconscious, that has been holding the belief that life has to be hard, that money doesn't grow on trees and you should pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. And, the harder you push, the faster that you'll get to that yes. What if it's just bad information that you were given? That's nobody's fault. This is not about blame, but it is about taking responsibility for the world you choose to live in. Now, when I say responsibility, when we as religious scientists say responsibility, what we're talking about is the ability to respond to whatever's going on. It is the control you actually do have and the power you actually do have to create your life as you would have it. And collectively, we create the world that works for everyone by taking responsibility for whether or not we are part of that world and living as part of that world. And there are so many ways and different levels of how we do that. Part of my personal practice is to sit in my prayer chair every single day and take a look at, what does my life look at? Where am I still in the habit of struggle or suffering? And what am I really trying to do there? What is the belief that I am holding that keeps me in that? That sense that maybe I'm not working hard enough, and therefore that means I'm lazy, rather than in tune with spirit and thus allowing spirit to do the work. Guess which one gets me further? I could continue suffering. I resign from that position. Thank you very much. And no, I'm not giving 2 weeks notice. I'm giving a lifetime. As a matter of fact, I'm getting credit for time served. So here in this moment, I invite you to join me in learning the natural laws. What are those natural laws? The primary one that we talk about here is that as we think, so we are. Whatever our beliefs are, and those include our conscious and unconscious beliefs, that is what we live. That is what shows up in our world. We get more and more evidence because the law of cause and effect can only say yes. It's kind of like we used to play with silly putty and smush it down on a comic book or on the funny, newspapers. Those are paper. Kids, you'll catch up in a second. Basically, it's garbage in, garbage out. Whatever you program the computer to do is what it's going to do. You have a computer going on up here. If you have bad data, it's going to act on the bad data. If you have good data and you have a good operating system without glitches, then it's going to work really well. How's that? Okay, I just lost half of the group to silly putty and the other half of the group to how computers' guts work. But that's okay. We're all here together and we get it. It comes down to, we live in this physical world and and there are things that we can do to make life easier at the physical level. In the Christian scriptures, in the book of Matthew, as a matter of fact, it's Matthew 17, there's a parable where Jesus and his crew get to Capernaum, And they're coming into town, and the tax collector shows up and says, we need whatever they were, 2 pennies from each person, and that's your tax for entering in the town. Think of it as a hospitality tax. Jesus was very clear that he didn't live according to human rules, but he also wasn't worried about them. So just to make life easy, he looked at one of his disciples, and said to him, look, we don't need to fuss with this. We don't owe anyone anything, but go fishing. Remember, most of his disciples were actually fishermen. Go fishing. The first, let down your line. The first fish you pull in will have a coin in its mouth. And that coin was enough to pay their tax for all of them. Or for both of them, I should say. And so we use natural law that the world, in Jesus's case, he knew that everything he needed came to him immediately. And so he was directed by an inner voice to send someone to go fishing. Does that make sense? Do you, like, when you get your tax bill, you go fishing? You might want to. But in order to pay your tax bill, do you go fishing? And just kind of spend a day by the lake? That doesn't make a lot of sense. But Jesus was so in touch with his Christed self. And he was not the only Christ that has ever been on the planet, by the way. If you're wondering who else, go look in the mirror. Jesus was so in touch with his Christed self, he could have said, go, look on that shelf over there towards the back. There's a shekel that's been left in the back and it's all covered with dirt. But his internal truth said, go fishing, grab the fish, the coin will be in its mouth, pay the silly old tax. We're not worried about it, but let's make this easy. This is how we can choose to live. We call Jesus the master teacher. We call him the great example, but not the great exception. What Jesus and Buddha and all the other master teachers that have ever been on the planet, all the other Christs and enlightened ones and teachers have ever done is come here to tell us how we can work with the natural law. Natural laws make life so much better. And if we will choose to use them, figure out what the principle is behind the, all the bells and whistles and the things we add for religion purposes and cultural purposes, if we will figure that out, then we actually do get to live a much simpler, happier life. In the Philosophy of Jesus, which is one of the less known books written by Ernest Holmes talks about no one needs to tell the chicken to sit down on those eggs and hatch them. There's a principle at work that the chicken doesn't question. We can use the same principle by putting fertilized eggs into an incubator. It's the same principle. We are not chickens. I am not going to try and sit around on eggs in order to have breakfast next week or, fried chicken for dinner or whatever it is. I'm not going to sit around trying to brood eggs myself, but I can take the principle of keeping them warm and keeping them safe and not letting anyone break them and create chickens for myself. I don't particularly need chickens right now, but it's a great example, and it's the one Ernest Holmes put in front of me this week, and so I obey and use it. Here's the thing. One of the ripples you will see across the lake of your life is something bringing you joy or not. If it is bringing you joy, if it is serving you, if it is serving your growth, comfortable or not, keep doing it. You are working with natural law in order to create the life that works for you. If you are doing something out of obligation, if you are in a position that no longer brings you joy, take a look at that. And maybe it's time for you to stop doing it. One of the rules I used to have and have returned to is if somebody tells me they're done with their volunteer position, I no longer get to argue. I don't get to guilt them into staying just because it's convenient for me. When I tell somebody, follow the spirit within you, I don't get to add in little, unless it's inconvenient. The truth is that if your spirit is telling you it's time to move on and do something different, or, stop meditating for an hour and a half in the morning and start meditating for an hour and a half at night, your soul is trying to tell you something. You should try it. You should listen to you. You're really smart. The Christ within you is really, really good at this game. And so I invite you to begin looking at Where in your life are you working with natural laws, and where are you working way too hard to do things all by yourself? One of the best tools that we have that helps us stay within natural law is our spiritual mind treatment. And this is where we change how we think by rising up into our own Christ consciousness, into our own experience of the one mind, in order to see more clearly and let go of false beliefs and gather good data. And so I invite you to join me now as we go into prayer. This prayer that we call spiritual mind treatment. If you want to close your eyes, that's fantastic. If you want to open them, fine. It's entirely up to you. See what works for you. But I close my eyes so that I might open and focus from the single eye, the internal eye. Standing witness now that God is all there is. That this good, this energy of life, that this web of life is the only thing that is inherent in the universe. There is only God. There is no second power that's trying to get in the way. There is God, period. God is life itself. God is love itself. God is joy and bliss and that peace and more peace about which we sang. God is grace. It is the unearned good that comes of simply being one with the divine. And we are all one with the divine. There is nothing else to be. There is no place outside of God to go. And so I now accept in this moment that all beings are one in God, one of God. And the truth of our being is that love and light and peace and power and poise. And so anything that looks unlike that, I just let go of as old information, bad data, outdated data, things that no longer serve that we used to believe. I bless and celebrate the opportunity to stand in this truth and to stand witness and speak this word on behalf of everyone, every sentient being, this entire planet, this entire universe. That God is, and God is all there is, and we are part of that, and so we are peace. I claim ease and grace for all of us. I claim that our birthright is wholeness and prosperity and joy, actual joy, that goes all the way down to our DNA because it is our birthright. It's who we really are. I let go of everything that looks unlike that, and it ceases to be. And all of that beautiful energy just pours into creating the world that works for everyone. And it is blessed and a blessing. And so with a very grateful heart, with joy and the ecstasy of coming home to truth, I simply allow the law of cause and effect to go to work on this. It's already been seen in the one mind. It has been witnessed by us. And now it moves into form according to natural law. I call it good and very good. And let it be. And so it is.